Hi there. Welcome to Infinite Stories. This is the podcast where we sit down and interview everyday people just like you and me. This is your host, Mitchell Vine, and boy, do we have an incredible story for you. Let's jump into this week's interview. Why don't you introduce yourself? Who are you?
Thanks for having me. Thanks for having me. Well, my name's Paul, and I run a YouTube channel called Understanding Conspiracy.
All right. And to kind of start the story, what are some of the earliest memories that you have growing up? What was it like being a kid?
I grew up in the northwest of England. It's a grey, dreary, 10 days of summer type of place. You know, it's growing up there. It's pretty working class, low economy type area. You know, not much attention from the government type of place. Heavily Labour government orientated, with a few pockets of rich affluence here and there. And I grew up in a typically normal working class family. My mum was a carer for disabled children at various schools, a teaching assistant, you would call that. My dad worked at factories making metal pipes for exhausts. And I grew up going to school in a pretty basic, non-religious community high school and primary school system. And you know, I think I had a good upbringing, despite these things. I wouldn't say anything terrible happened or there was anything outlandish. You know, I think I just went through the motions like anyone would in that area. And yeah, I guess that's what it was like just growing up in the northwest of England. Nothing much really happens, but we have a good sense of humour because everything's so miserable. So we're pretty dry, sarcastic, cut to the point type people. So it was never a dull moment. I'll say that.
Fantastic. So then, it sounds like your upbringing was a lot different than I was. So what did like a typical day look like for you then? I mean, does the culture shift at all from where you are?
Well, it depends. It depends what kind of upbringing you have. I mean, I let's say as a child, you know, same as any other child in the world. You go and play with friends, you kick a ball around, you know, if you play tag or whatever you do, you climb trees, you know, I did all that the basic stuff. But when you get a bit older, you know, innocence starts to dwindle away and the realities of the dark side of life starts to creep in. You know, I was staying out late with friends, you know, drinking in parks, having encounters with rival village gangs who were trying to fight for no other reason than they had nothing better to do, and all those type of things you get swept up in. And I've always been somebody who's kind of been on the sidelines of it all. I'm kind of in the world but out of it. I know these people, they're my people, it's where I come from, we live in the same place. I empathise with why they behave the way they do, but I've just never been got swept up in that chav culture, as we call it in Britain, you know. I don't know what they call it today actually, and I'm showing my age a bit there probably, but things have, you know, I've always kind of just stood on the sidelines and observed these things. Typically, you know, you have a group of lad friends, they want to play football together while the girls watch over there or something. I was typically sat with the girls because I don't care about playing sports ball. I don't care about that kind of stuff. I was the artist, you know. I cared about making things, thinking about things, and getting into philosophy. So in my early teen years, I had a group of friends who, there was two people who kind of stood out among them who were the thinkers, let's say. We had this thing we called the brain trust. It was just three of us, the trio, you know, and we would just literally just sit until the night talking about philosophy and trying to answer the big understand the big questions you can possibly understand at 15 years old, you know what I mean? And again, you go through that process and you go through the basics, you know, and then eventually once you've been doing it for a few years, you're getting into metaphysical concepts that no one has the answer to, and I guess that's just always what I've enjoyed doing. So my day-to-day life wasn't stereotypical to like a normal teenager or something like that. Like I said, I was always a bit of out of the culture, never really in the culture type of person, and that's just always the way I've been, really. So it's a hard question to answer because I don't know how to summarize 32 years of my life like that, you know. But my youth was relatively ordinary, I would say, working class ordinary, and my teen years were a bit more intense. Rebellion, you know, smoking, drinking, tattoos, drugs, all that type of thing. Sex obsessed teenager typically does, quite a stereotype, you know. But then my early 20s were a bit more hardcore into all of that in the seek of hedonism, and then my mid-20s I found Christ, and I'm 32 now, with my second kid on the way, happily married, a creator, a YouTuber, a video maker, and ex-manager of a supermarket. I've got experience, and I think I'm just a different person than those who I once was, in a way. So there's a summary of my life very quickly.
That was a great summary. Well, let's pick that apart then. You kind of talked about how the middle school era was when your character really started to kind of shape. Were there any events that might have guided that along, I guess?
I suppose so. I mean, growing up, I was the youngest child. My mother had two children before me with a different father. She was quite young when she had them. I think she was 19 when she had her first child, and 22 when she had my brother, the second child. And then met my dad at like 24, and then I don't know. I'm not sure how long it was, but I know they had me when I was when they were like 30, 29. So I was quite young. I was like, it's like a 5-year gap, 5 to 7 year gap between my brother and my sister. So I've always been the outsider looking in at things in a way, and I've been intuitive most of my life, and I could see there was tension for my older siblings towards me, the new younger child from a new father. I've never been oblivious to reading a room. I know what people are thinking when they're not thinking it. So I suppose I've had those moments growing up where I've seen my brother and sister struggle with their father, who unfortunately ended up killing himself. I was 17 at the time, I think, maybe 16. I don't know. I was young, it was around that period. It was 2001, so I'm not. My math is terrible. However old I was born in 92, 2001. However old I was then, but maybe 19 or something like that, or 18. But I was young enough to know that I was in the car, being taken with my sister in the car. We got a phone call saying, from her father's new girlfriend, saying you need to come round, something's happened. And my sister is in the car. She's studying for her exams to be an optician. I'm just there by chance, and I'm in the car going with them, with my parents. And she's just saying things like, "Oh, what's he done now? I don't have time for this. I got an exam coming up in a week. I don't need this stress." And blah blah blah. And you get there, and there's two police officers sat there, and she's like, "Oh, Louise, I'm so sorry," says this girlfriend, her father's girlfriend. And the two police officers say, "Are you Louise?" And they're like, "Yeah." And she says, "I'm sorry to tell you, your father's killed himself. We found his body at this time of last night." And she just screams in horror and covers her mouth, and no one expected that. And it's one of those moments in your life, it kind of, no one saw it coming. He was the happiest guy you could ever know. He would treat me with so much respect as well. You wouldn't think he had that in him. But then when the inquest happens after such an event, and you go through the law system, and to get to the bottom of what happened, you have to go through. People get interviewed on a stand. Where were you at this time? You were the last person to see them, and the story gets told basically to try and uncover the last moments of that person's life to the best we can to put an end to that story and put a full stop on the end of it. And you hear about the build up to all this, and the depression, the mania, the schizophrenia, the drugs, all these type of things. And it's kind of like, well, of course it was going to happen, but hearing my sister's blood curdling screams at the death of the suicide of her father, I suppose that left a lasting impact on me. I think that's one of my key memories, which got me really thinking about mortality and life and depression, the impact of life has on people in our journey, in our waking life, day to day, what we all have to go through, the suffering, the silent suffering of each individual behind closed doors. All of those things really snapped me out of my own narcissistic, typical teenage worldview of me, everything revolves around me. And I think that's when I really understood that there's suffering in this world and people need help. And that's always stuck with me, and that was always my takeaway from it after my own processing. And I suppose that's what really set me off from like my late teens to want to get to the bottom of the spiritual nature of reality, the meaning of it all. What's it for, and what's going on in people's lives that could drive them to such horrible decisions that affect everybody. And there has to be meaning, And I know it's cliche, but I suppose that's what set me off, and in a way, that's always shaped my path. And what I try to do today is help people process things when they discover horrible truths, which is pretty much what being a conspiracy theorist is, and being a Christian in many ways. It's learning that the world is being shaped and controlled in ways that aren't pleasant by people who don't have good intentions, and some people don't know how to really deal with or process that trauma of discovering such a thing. And I have this whole series dedicated to helping people deal with that trauma. It's called Tips for Truthers. I have a podcast called Truther Therapy Sessions, and I suppose it all stems from this desire to want to help people in my own stumbling, naive, best I can type of way, But prior to that, it's not like I hadn't had heartbreak and pain and bad things and death in the family, But that was a moment. That was one of my key defining moments, I would say.
Yeah, I know you kind of mentioned that wasn't like your first moment of heartbreak or anything, but a question that I love asking on the podcast is, do you have like the earliest memory of a time where you understood what sin was, or what right and wrong was? Do you have any key memories like that?
I remember when being really young in a bar with my father, and my mother was there too, and I don't know how old I was. It's young enough for it to be looking eye level with a table. I think that's the kind of the memory. The memory is that I'm quite low down, looking up at all of this happen, looking up at this happen, And I remember seeing a drunk person hit my dad in a bar fight. And my father's not really a fighter, he's a big guy, but he's not really into fighting, isn't he? He's a pretty happy-go-lucky, funny, go-along-to-get-along type of guy. So for someone to punch him in the face and to see that as a young child, I think that was my first hint that, life isn't gold. All that glitters isn't gold. There's problems, there's bad people, and I think that's my first loss of innocent moment. My parents, this is no aspersions towards them. They like to have a drink and have a good time, and I guess there were issues with that lifestyle which I had to witness growing up as well. So I've always seen the sin of that type of life and that the consequences of drunkenness, and I'm not a drinker myself today. I don't drink. I'm not really interested in it. And I had my own thing, with cannabis for many years, but I don't touch anything anymore, and I'm sober. But I suppose that's my earliest memory of seeing sin manifest into something negative in a way. My own sin, a lot of things. Rebellion, I suppose, is the earliest thing. I just don't want to be controlled, and to lash out in the worst possible ways is what I typically did, and I went out and did the things behind my parents' back that typical teenagers do. But we were growing up in that age where it was transitioning to the internet in a way, and then obviously things like pornography and stuff like that can start to affect young minds earlier than it should have been. I still remember a time where it was magazines, and I don't think that's even like a thing anymore, but it's kind of, that was always something that kind of, I could see the warping effect it had on my mind and the young minds of people around me as well, which again is, and I suppose I've always been an observer, and again I grew up talking about these things and trying to hash these things out, the problem of pain and suffering in the world and sin, whether I knew it or not at the time, because I wasn't a religious person, so I did conceptualize it as trying to understand mankind's folly and sin. But I suppose that's what I've always been kind of observant about and trying to learn from every experience about, and I'm not without it. I really myself was probably the worst, up there with the worst of them, next to murder, which I haven't committed, but vengefulness and wrath is still something I've also held on to, hatred, unforgiveness, keeping a list of things like this. I've been there, and it took a long time and a lot of work and turning to Christ for me to let go of all that kind of thing. But my earliest memory of seeing sin manifest was, I suppose, seeing my father get punched by somebody who was drunk. I think that's my earliest memory, like a flashback there that I can remember.
Man, I love asking that question because it always reminds me that we're all in the same playing field of we all have those different memories, we all have those different experiences, and sin is the common denominator that we all have, whether we want to admit it or not. And just that conflict and that suffering that you were talking about, that's really good. I love focusing in on redemptive storytelling, and you can't have redemption without having the worst of it. And you need to be redeemed from something. You need to have those sinful experiences, and even not that I would love to encourage the idea of trauma in people's lives, but redemption still covers trauma as well, and the gospel is sufficient in all those areas. So that's really I love how you put that. Did you have any lies within your middle school time, and maybe even transitioning into the high school era, of any lies that you wrestled with regarding yourself, or maybe lies that you believed about other people?
I suppose going into my teenage years, I was quite hedonistic, narcissistic, self-centered, very much about why should I care about what other people think and feel? They certainly don't care about. Certainly don't care about me. So I was very much out for number one, and I think that the lone wolf belief system was probably a big lie that I thought was the way you need to navigate your way through life in order to succeed, and as though having enemies was part and parcel of existing, you know. And don't get me wrong, I suppose in a way it is for everybody, but seeking it out in a sense, you know, is kind of one of the biggest lies I had for myself. You know, I wasn't a nice person. I don't like who I was in my old life. I look back at it and I cringe. You know, like Facebook send you posts from like 15 years ago. 15 years ago today you posted this, and I'm reading it. I'm like, what am I doing? Who is that? You know, what am I even saying? What an absolute stupid, cringy, disgusting thing to post publicly about yourself and make people think that has anything to do with who you are. It's kind of, and I get those reminders all the time of my past life through those methods, and it's kind of unbelievable. And you know, I had enemies. I had people who hated me, you know, who didn't like who I was because of my personality all through college and high school and things like this. In high school, I was a bit of an outcast music artist type, never really fit into popular or like weird. I guess I was always in the middle. I wasn't anything, so I was kind of going unnoticed my entire life. And you know, I tried hard. I really love art. I'm a creative person. I'm a painter and a drawer, and I tried my hardest all through high school to do every club after school, all these type of things, you know, and be a part of the art department and known entity. And I remember at the end of my like 5 years at high school, they do give like rewards out for like people who were good at particular topics, and I thought I was going to get the art one, and I didn't get it, and that hurt me way more than it should have. Okay, and it was things like that happening quite a lot. And, you know, not to get into too many details, because it's not like the person who got the award is like cared about anything like that, but I feel like it was more of a diversity thing. They gave it to them to make themselves seem like they had some kind of diversity thing going on. And I know I'm not trying to, it doesn't matter, but that's clearly what they were doing, you know. And even through college, you know, I entered a competition, and in the end they gave the reward to a different group of people, and there was clearly a political motive behind it, and I was like, why do I even try? Why do I even bother? You know, and I get hitting these moments. It's like, it's like the world always going unnoticed in a way, and it affected me more because it was like, this is what I'm trying to make myself known for this guy who does art, but no recognition anywhere along the way. And I don't know, I built up this image in my mind of who I was, which was just one big lie in a sense, and I was trying to define myself by my successes and the way other people saw me. And I wasn't a good person for it. I feel like everything was driven by narcissistic, self-obsessed grandiosity, which I don't believe is who I wanted to be, but it's what the world was kind of forcing me to be and behave like. And I had like a Facebook group made about me in college, like everybody hates Paul Stobbs. And my first reaction was, I'm going to find the person who's done this to me and destroy them. And I did figure out who did it. And I slammed all the evidence in front of their desk, and I said, I know it was you. And I said some horrible things to them, like a demon had taken over me. And I didn't do anything about it, but I made it clear that any moment I could ruin their life, and they would always live on the edge of knowing that. And it's kind of like, I wouldn't dream of doing that now. And it's kind of, I guess, the biggest lie I've ever lived is believing I was the ego I created for myself before I was saved. I guess is what I'm trying to say here. And it took a long time for me to realize, Paul, if everyone in the room is calling you a dickhead, you're probably a dickhead. You need to sort it out, you know. And it was a humbling moment, and I think I've had to do a lot of work. And I self-medicated for many years, smoking cannabis for 8 years straight, every day, 5 joints a day, just to not have to deal with who I was or face the traumas I dealt with, or processing that death and that suicide, for example, the things like this. And there was an 8-year period of my life, you know, from like, I would say 16 to like 24, where I didn't progress or deal with anything, and I stayed in a stasis of trying to just forget. And it only took being saved, quitting all these things, demonic attack, oppression, self-work, years of self-work and reflection, and getting closer to Christ, I finally began to live in the truth of what I actually am, who God actually intended me to really be. And I realized most of my life I was kind of fighting against it in a way. I didn't want to follow the path he had laid out for me, but now I feel like I have aligned myself more to the plan he had in mind. I couldn't ask for a better life. It's what I really wanted, you know, because I pursued for years sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you know. I play quite a lot of instruments. I'm a creative, artistic guy. You know, growing up as a teenager, young 20s, I didn't have any shortage of options, you know, and you know, I'm quite precarious. I've had a lot of sexual partners, and these aren't things I'm proud of now. I'm not trying to say this as a brag. It's more of a, at the end of it all the drugs and all of these things, I was a broken, empty shell, hollow person who didn't know who I was or where I was supposed to be or where I was going. I was empty. I was dead inside. I contemplated just what's the point, you know. I was at the end of my tether. Along with learning about all the horrible conspiracy stuff on top of this at the end of it all, which made me realise, oh no, the world's even worse than I thought it was. Never mind my own petty problems. Look at the state of everything else, you know. And it's kind of sincerely breaking down and just asking Jesus, please help me. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what's going. I don't know what to do. I failed. I failed miserably, you know. I failed. I've wasted my life pursuing pointless things, and I have nothing to show for it. And I'm hollow. I don't even know. I don't have a self. I don't know who I am. I'm only trying to be what the world is telling me I'm supposed to be, in a way, you know. And like I said, since swapping over to the truth and aligning myself with His will, I think I've grown up in a way. I think that's what it does. Is like I'm a new person in a sense, and I'm not saying I'm perfect, but it was a humbling experience. So I guess the lies is believing that all I was what the world told me I was, in a sense.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. No, even the scripture that talks about, I believe it's 2 Corinthians, that talks about just being a new creation and just the role that we have to play in the kingdom of God after becoming that new creation. Like, there's such a weight that's just lifted off your shoulders at that point of like, okay, you don't even, everything that you even think that you need to be doing for God, it's a lot easier, and yet it is a lot harder at the same time. So it does balance out, but just that idea of walking in grace and truth, that idea of just loving people genuinely and speaking the truth in love, and just a lot of the things that we overcomplicate and try to check off our list on a day-to-day basis, that's just not what Jesus wants at all. And
no.
that new creation, that walking with the Spirit, it's a lot more, I don't want to say relaxed, but I mean, the truth, it's peaceful, that's for sure. When done right.
It's not an instant thing, though. I mean,
oh, no.
I fought against His will for me. I may have been born again in 2014, but it took me really until 2 years ago to fully get in line. It didn't happen straight away. I had to do a lot. I had to let go of a lot of things. I had to reformulate my identity in Christ, and that comes with burning away a lot of baggage. I had to give up a lot of drugs. I had to cleanse myself of those things. I had to detox. I had to do the work, reevaluate myself, my personality, the people I've hurt along the way, the things that have affected me. And there was a 5-year period of my life where I was managing a supermarket, and not running the channel I have today, which I had a couple of years before having to leave. And my workplace discovered my YouTube channel at the time. And in the early days of my videos, I was an angry guy because I was learning about all this horrible stuff. I was on fire for the Lord, and I was pretty passionate about it, and I was condemning people and fighting pedophiles and all sorts of things online, and really getting zealous about narcissistic psychopaths starting cults and all this sort of stuff. And it's kind of, I was a small channel with a lot of zeal, and my did not do any good for my blood pressure at all, but the point is, that was still me holding on to that attack dog mode of my old personality, but at the same time, God was always putting me in situations which were humbling me and taking that away from me. And I think the channel got taken away from me in 2016, about 2018, 2006, something around that time. Because I needed to stop. I needed to self-reflect and get away from that online world and actually do some real boots on the ground observation of what it means to exist in the world. And managing that supermarket for 8 years of my life, I worked in a supermarket, but becoming a manager was 5 of it. And I got sat down one day by the management, and they were like, you can't have this YouTube channel and be a manager. You just can't do 2 things. You can't be both. If the staff find it, we're not going to be able to defend you. You're too controversial. This is a multicultural, diverse company. You're too offensive. It's kind of, we're just going to, you can be a store assistant with this, but you just can't be a manager. And I just got the job, so I was like, okay, well, fair enough, it wasn't my proudest moment, but I stepped down from the YouTube and I focused on being a manager, and those 5 years taught me a lot. I mean, it humbled me massively. It's hard. It's a hard job, and managing people, a small team, dealing with the public, money, the ins and outs of politics of working with the company, and I think that experience, 5 years break from pursuing the truth and trying to tell the truth online, was God's way of saying, gain some perspective. These are real people you're dealing with. This is what real people deal with, and it's kind of, it helped me gain a lot of focus and a lot of, I suppose, skills in managing people better and dealing with stressful situations better as well. But then towards the end of those 5 years, there was this voice in the back of my mind that was telling me, Paul, you may be a supermarket manager, but that's not what you are. You're a conspiracy theorist, and I knew that deep down. I didn't like being one, a supermarket manager. It's just what I was doing at the time, and again, learning a lot from it, which I'm thankful for the experiences, but I wasn't happy there. It wasn't what I was supposed to be doing with my life. And I think through that refinement process and taking that time, things started to happen that pushed me out of the company. Horrible things, it culminated with me being grabbed around the throat by somebody who I refused to serve alcohol to, the husband of somebody who I refused to serve alcohol to because they had the 2 teenage girls with them. It was a whole thing, But the way I was treated by the company after that made me and my wife say, let's just quit. We don't need to do this. Why we're putting up with this. So we did. We took the leap of faith and we quit, started our own photography company. Wedding photography, which had a good run for a year and a half, but it just didn't work out and luckily by that point my YouTube channel had taken off. I'm on my way to publishing a book, which is published now, and I finally felt like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing now, with the right mindset, with the right demeanor, with the right attitude, and with a stronger faith than ever. But it took, 7 years from being born again and saved to actually be in any position to be useful for the Lord, in any real capacity that would be helpful and fruitful. Because my YouTube channel at the start was okay, but the fruit was bad. It was negative. It was angry. It was rage bait. It was too much in the world still, not with no real perspective of what you should be focusing on. And I feel like what I do today is much better, and actually helping people get to the gospel, which was the point of the whole thing. The whole point of being a truther isn't to talk about what the evil people are doing all the time. It's to use that for God to say, it's because God's real. That's why they're doing this. You need to understand what's going on there. You need to understand who Jesus is, and that's always kind of where I always shift the focus of my channel to that now. And I get people telling me it's working. In fact, I just hit 5 million views just before we did this show. I just checked it. And here's to another 5 million chances to get the gospel to people. But again, all I'm saying is it doesn't happen overnight just because you're born again. There's work to be done.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's kind of break that apart a little bit more. You were talking around the college age was kind of the last part of the story that we were talking about before the lies. So what were some pivotal moments through college and maybe the years right after college? What were some events that shaped your character and even either pushed you more towards brokenness or more towards Christ?
Well, when I started, we call it university here. We don't call it college. College to us is a couple of years after high school, which you leave high school at 16. 17 and 18, you do college for 2 years, and then you go to university from like 19 to 21. I started college at 16 doing like maths, chemistry, biology, and physics. I was trying to be a doctor. I don't know why. I'm an artist. I don't know what got that into my head. I don't know what. Maybe I watched too much Scrubs growing up as a teenager or something. I have no idea. But I failed miserably at that. After 3 months, I was failing everything because I'm an artist. I'm a creative mind. I'm not a scientist. I'm not good with numbers. I shouldn't have bothered doing that. I should have stuck to my strengths. So I learned that lesson. And I did. I went back and did what's called a BTEC in art and design, which is not A levels. It's more of a hands-on approach to studying, rather than rigid tests and stuff like this. I aced it. I got the top marks, highest the college has ever seen, and because that's what I've always been good at. I've always. It's not work to me. Art, creative, making things, and being creative. It's effortless, and I'm not trying to brag. It's just it just isn't a thing. I can always draw. I always have been able to draw. I don't have to think about it. No one's ever taught me to do those things. It's just it's a gift from God. I naturally blessed with that kind of talent, and because I used to see people come in after class studying really hard, working really hard on their project, putting all these extra hours in, and I never felt like I was ever doing anything or even barely in the studio, and I still got the higher marks because it's so. I'm through my observation, I'm realizing this comes a lot easier to me than it does to others. But put me in a classroom with a mathematician, I'm awful. I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. I'm a fish out of water. You know what I mean? So it's not like play to your strengths is what I learned. If you're good at something, stick to it. But so that's kind of what I did. I went to university after college, and I did a fine art degree. And I had to move cities, and I moved to the other side of England to a place called Lincoln, next to this beautiful cathedral. Literally, I studied next to the cathedral. You couldn't ask for a better setting, and I ended up there by chance because I actually got rejected from all the top art colleges, university I applied to in the UK. I ended up going into clearing, and basically you just take what's left. And I went to this place in Lincoln. I went to this place in Lincoln, and they took me in no problem, but I'm glad they did because it was an amazing experience, and it taught me so much, and during that time I wasn't a religious person, but I was a spiritual person. I was searching for answers in Eastern mysticism and occult means, psychedelic exploration, things like this, trying to explore consciousness from a Jungian perspective, very psychoanalytical / oddly spiritual Taoist Eastern something or other. It was a weird blend of beliefs, but I was searching for answers. I was trying to get close to God, but I just didn't know how. I didn't have a context to understand how to do that. I wasn't raised Christian or Catholic or anything, I just didn't understand what to do or how to do it. I'd always had a bit of an anti-Christian bent just because that's the popular thing to do at that age. But it wasn't like I understood really what Christianity really was necessarily. And through university, I ended up coming across the 2012 end of the world fears. Everyone thought the world was going to end because the Mayan calendar came to an end, and it kind of sucked me into the conspiracy world. I just had to know what these people were watching to make them say something like that. And it just set me off. It was one rabbit hole after another, and I just started to see this holistic image in my mind, and me forever being the artist I was. I just made it all about my artwork for my university degree. That became my subject matter, as they call it. And everything I was making for those 3 years at university was just centered around conspiracy and the world of conspiracy and sacred geometry and the occult and the symbolism in artwork and media and all that stuff. I was obsessed with it. I just couldn't get it out of my mind. And there was just so much there to work with as an artist, so much subject matter to mould into something visual to try and relay that message to people as clearly as possible. You know, what do conspiracy theorists believe? Well, let me understand it and let you know, and that's what understanding conspiracy became. That's what it was. It was a university project, first and foremost. And yeah, it wasn't Christian-based. It really wasn't at the start. It was me trying to come at it from a psychoanalytical perspective, like an anthropological perspective, and break down the culture of conspiracy, all the factions within it with different belief systems and different ways of interpreting world events. And if someone was to ask me, I could relay to them what that particular contextual belief was from those specific areas, and that's what my main intention was to begin with. So I created this logo, which I get a lot of hate for today, which is basically an amalgamed caricature of the conspiracy. It represents everything to do with the conspiracy you need to understand. And again, I wasn't a Christian when I made the thing. I didn't think much of it. And now I get people saying, why do you bear the Star of Remphan? Clearly you're a shill satanic misleader who wants to make people believe in the devil. And I'm like, I do nothing but talk about the gospel. I don't know what you're on about. It doesn't matter how much I try to explain the origins of this logo to people. They just can't see past the shape, and they think it's an allegiance to it rather than an exposition of it, in a sense. But through those formative years in university where I was seeped in this, I was also doing my own personal journey of trying to understand who I was and who God was, and I was always bumping into the Christian perspective in my research to explain the horrors of the world and the control systems and the influence of Satan and all these type of things. And I just didn't know what to make of it. Like, I was like, no, they can't. No way did they have the answer. Like, no way. Like, so for a long time, I just didn't bother researching the Christian perspective thoroughly, but I just kept hitting this wall of something to do with Christ. The only reason any of this is happening is something to do with this Jesus character and whatever happened when he died and resurrected. Like, clearly this had something to do with this whole conspiracy today. And when I did finally go into it, and then it kind of shook me to the core that I thought the answers could be found through my own psychedelic explorations, through my own philosophies, my own vain imaginations, and the explorations of these deep concepts and ideas from a psychological perspective, or understanding dualism or whatever it is, and trying to reconcile oneself with one's shadow in a Jungian perspective. But then when I really humbly listened to these pastors and preachers, people like Derek Prince was a big influence, kind of telling me the gospel and what it actually means and how it applies to your life and what Christ actually did and the impact that it had on the world. And it kind of shook me to a level where I was like, I don't know what to do with this. Because I know it's true, but I don't want it to be true, because I still had that narcissistic, hedonistic, self-aggrandizing worldview at the time. It was all about me, and I was seeking nothing but hedonism and pleasure to gratify this hole in my life, which was spiritual in nature. And I suppose I had to hit rock bottom before I could get to that moment, as I mentioned earlier, where I had to humbly ask for help. And I knew enough of a basic about Christianity by that point, thanks to my research into all of these things through those formative university years, that when I did reach my lowest point, and I broke down, and I knew, okay, Jesus, if you're real, if this is all true, show me. And he did. Ask and you'll receive is clear as day, and that's what happened. And since that time, in March 2014, my life has not been the same. And I feel like I'm closer to God than ever, and I'm not saying I know it all, but I think I'm living more aligned to truth than ever. And I think that the impact it has tangibly had on my life is measurable in many ways. And all I aim to do now is spread that message to people with the channel I got from all that past life university thing, and to this day, like I said, I had to take some time off to gain some perspective, forced time off, but I'm glad for it. I think God has done that on purpose, and like I said, here I am today, 2 years back onto the thing, and the channel has grown. I now have 70,000 subscribers. I've published a book, 5 million views and 500 videos, and it's just going from strength to strength. And I think the community we've built is fantastic, and it's not without its struggles. It's not without the attacks and other things, but at the same time, I wouldn't have it any other way now.
That's incredible. So then I really want to kind of peel back the layers a little bit after this aha moment, or this very clear experience of redemption. Wow. How did your life change on an individual basis? Like, maybe with your relationships. You mentioned the job experience. Like, how did you see your character change with the gospel?
Well, initially, like I said, I had a lot of addictions I needed to break. I needed to stop smoking nicotine, cannabis. I quit the entheogens instantly. I didn't do any psychedelics again after that day or any hard drugs. It was the basic stuff I needed to work on then. But the thing is that my heart changed. In the past, I could justify it. Well, everyone needs something to get through this world. Everyone needs advice. Well, mine's not as bad as drinking, so what's the big deal? You know, cannabis never killed anybody, and I had all these justifications to convince myself it was still okay to do. And it took 2 years after that date for me to finally quit cannabis. It didn't happen overnight, but the conviction was now on me, heavy on me. The Holy Spirit was convicting me. Every time I smoked a joint, I was always thinking, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? This is not what I need to be doing now, you know. And I never had that conviction prior to giving myself to Christ and asking for help. I was given over to my reprobate mind. I believed everything I was doing was right and justified and there was no problems. But suddenly I was confronted with my addiction, my avoidance of dealing with emotional traumas and stresses, and self-medicating to kick the can further down the road. I had stuff I needed to deal with, and God was telling me, you're not ready to deal with this until you drop all these chemicals. You need to deal with it sober. And again, I slowly weaned myself off tobacco. I switched to mullein, which is like a leaf, like a nicotine-less substitute for tobacco. I went onto an e-cigarette for my nicotine instead and started lowering the strength of the nicotine. Because you can mix up your own liquid, you know, so I was lowering that to next to nothing. And the first thing I quit was cannabis in 2016. After switching my tobacco to mullein to mix with the cannabis, I eventually just stopped one day. And I documented the whole thing. 2 weeks was the worst 2 weeks of my entire life in terms of dealing with that withdrawal. It's not really withdrawal, it's more of a mental withdrawal, because the physical symptoms disappear after about a week, maybe like a few days, like 4 days. But mentally, it's a struggle letting that go, because you build these routines and habits you need to break, and you end up dreaming again for the first time in like 8 years, and you start remembering things from 8 years ago that you've completely forgot. It's like you've woke up from a dream, and suddenly you're hit with the harsh physical nature of reality, when up until that point, time was just a construct, and you've just been kind of daydreaming through reality up until that point. So as I was hit with that reality, and you know, I had to do a lot of work from the 2016 to 18 period sober off cannabis, and I only ever really drank for special occasions, weddings, friends' birthdays. I didn't really drink at all in between. Wasn't interested. But the nicotine was the other thing I needed to kick after that, and that I only quit that fully about 2 years ago, after lowering the nicotine down on the strength of my e-cig. But it was a hard one. That was a hard one to let go. And a lot of it's an identity issue as well. It's like, well, who am I if I'm not the guy who smokes? Who am I if I'm not the weed smoker in the group? You know, you build your identity around these vices, and you need to reevaluate who are you without them? Who did God intend you to be without the drug, you know? And I had to do all that work, and again, I didn't like who was in the mirror originally. And these things, these confrontations happen. So a lot of that work happened when I was saved. A lot of letting go of addictions and really doing the work on myself to know who I actually am, and to see the bad and where I need to change, and where I need to let go of some things. So yeah, a lot of that. Then relationships definitely are something I was pretty much celibate after I got saved. I just didn't bother with it. I didn't want to bring another person into my life until I knew I was in a place where that was fair to them. And like I said, I was somebody who had a lot of work to do. So for many years, I just wasn't interested in that. I wasn't pursuing that, you know. There was like the odd little thing here and there, but it didn't go very long, like a week, maybe 2, because I just couldn't do it. I was like, no, I'm not ready for this, you know, that type of thing. So let's just leave it before it gets too far, sort of situation. But then after I finally became a manager, was in full swing with that, you know. I met my wife, and my now wife, you know, and my life has just been better. I can't explain it. Like it's like as soon as I stopped trying to get those type of things, it all kind of fell into place. You know, I gave it over to God, and He provided everything I needed when I needed it. and helped me get through everything in his time and process things in his time. And it was difficult because it's like a 70-30 thing. I have to go 70% of the way and God will take me the other 30. You know what I mean? It's kind of, you have to put the effort in and he'll provide the comfort along the way to make it easier than it would have already otherwise have been. And when Keely came into my life, I think I was really at a point where I was me, who I actually am, you know, and we hit it off immediately. We had a lot in common, youngest of the family, you know, a lot of similar experiences growing up, and it's kind of a similar skepticism for authority, all these type of things, you know, and it kind of, and it all kind of, it just worked, and I felt like I'd known her my entire life, really. It's like we had one date, and it's like I knew her, I knew who she was, and it's kind of like it was a weird feeling, weird sensation. It's kind of like I know you. I've never met before, but it's kind of like I know who you are. I felt that instant connection, you know, and we just haven't been apart from each other since that day. We now have, you know, we're married. We have a beautiful son who's about to turn 3. We have another kid on the way now, a boy, and it's kind of, I didn't see myself having a family before I was saved. I didn't see I was a hedonistic, self-centered, narcissistic drug addict who I expect myself to be dead before 30. I didn't care, you know, but now I have these things. It's kind of, I see what the point is, like what God has in store for all of us, the meaning of life, in a sense. I know it's as cliche as it is, but it's to have these things, to have that family, to have love, and to have something to pass on whatever you learn onto, and to see your children be better than you and all that type. It's to have a responsibility for someone other than yourself, to take on that responsibility willingly. And I'm not saying everybody does this perfectly or there's a right or wrong, because it's stressful, it's hard, and I've said it's easy, but the happiness isn't the be all and end all of life. The struggle is a part of the journey, and it's there for you to learn from it. And it's kind of I don't think I ever would have really understood any of this if I hadn't have gone through all the pain first, you know. And I guess again, I explained to you, I look back on the posts that were made, which that's the odd thing about today's world. Our entire life is documented online, so I get these reminders of who I used to be from something like Facebook, and it's not me. I don't know what that is. I don't know who that is. You know, I don't. It was a construct. It was a lie. It's somebody else, you know. And so that's what it means to really be born again. I didn't understand what that even meant until you go through it, and you're kind of like, oh, it's a real, tangible change in who you are. Not to be something you're not, but to finally become who you were supposed to be in the eyes of God. That's what being born again truly is. Because you're born into the world will make you into something that you're not. You'll be born again in God, and he'll make you to be who he intended you to be. That's what being born again truly is. And then, you know, I think a lot of naive views out there think Christianity is like you become a member of a cult and you lose your identity. I would say it's the opposite. I say you find your identity when you finally actually give yourself to Christ and God. He gives you and shows you the direction to go to be your true self and who you want to be. It's kind of the life he has mapped out for you is the life you want. That's, you know, the real life you actually want, not the thing you've been told you want from the world, which you've been fruitlessly pursuing to your own death, you know. And we sometimes, this is the thing, we don't really know what we want until you get it. that's the mystery of it all, you know. That's the mystery. I didn't realize that what I wanted was stability in a family and the ability to pursue my creativity with the support of that family, you know. And when you get something like that, you hold on to it. That's all I can say.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at stories as a whole, one of my favorite characters in most stories, not all, is the mentor figure, the teacher, or the guide. Looking back throughout your story, did you have any teachers or mentors or guides that kind of pointed you along the way?
Well, I had in high school, I had an art teacher, Mrs. Dean, she was called, and she was a typical middle class tough art teacher type, with wearing the colourful thin scarves, you know, flamboyant type, and she wasn't much a mentor, more very supportive of my creativity. And I remember there was another one there. I think her name was Miss Murray, if I remember. I don't know the first names, because that's what you did in England. You don't know the people's first names, you just know them by the second name. But I remember this, and when she looked at what I was going to do at college, which I explained to you was maths, chemistry, biology, and philosophy, and she looked at me and she's like, "Why aren't you doing art? Like, why aren't you doing art?" I was like, I don't know. I just don't want to be. I don't want to do that. And she looked at me like, whatever. Like, what a weird thing, you know. And it's kind of like, and that stuck with me, because after I went through the failure of failing miserably at these things I'm clearly not any good at, which I was pursuing for some God only knows what reason, because I thought that would get me further in life and get me more money, having all the sciences, you know. I guess is what I thought, or something. I remembered what these teachers had said to me, you know, Paul, be an artist. That's what you are, you know. And I suppose that was my first mentorship, if you want to call it something like that. But I wouldn't say I'm not one for idols. I've never really followed a musician or followed a famous person or looked or authors or anything like that. I've very much been jaded and not really interested in latching on to a figure like a father or a mentor figure. So I've never really had a mentor in life, but I would say I've studied great teachers, which have helped me gain some perspective. And I suppose in terms of lifestyle, my grandparents were a big influence. And I'm not saying they were perfect people. I'm learning stuff as I get older about the inner politics of our family, which make me look at those people in a whole new light, you know, as you do when you get older, and the veneer and the rose-tinted glasses drop. But as a child, I observed my grandparents always saving for everything they owned, never getting into debt, that type of attitude. That stuck with me. It gave me that sense of, you know, you have to be sensible with what you've got, never be frivolous with your money and all these stuff. I've always had that kind of attitude, you know. My mum has been extremely supportive of me, even when I was a horrible person and a drug addict and the rest of it. She has always been there through and thick and thin, has never once told me I couldn't do what I wanted to do. And my wife, again, has always been there, giving me the push to take those leaps necessary to give it all over and just try to pursue what actually matters. And from strength to strength I've been since being with her as well. But you know, I've had a lot of great teachers who I've studied over the years. Like I said, Derek Prince was a great early Christian teacher for me. He really put it into perspective I could understand. But then in the conspiracy world, there was people I've kind of watched as kind of inspirational, you know, as somebody I would like to be that type of person one day. Watching people like Rob Skiba make these talks in front of like big people at conventions, talking about absolutely wild, crazy ideas, you know, with the confidence to do that. I've always looked at that and said, I want to have that confidence to do those things. And I feel kind of sad actually now that he's passed away. Because now I'm in the conspiracy gay world and I'm at that level where I have a following and have that kind of influence like I saw he had at a similar level when I was watching him. If he had been alive today, maybe I would have had a chance to speak with him, you know, and actually have that conversation. But sadly it's not there anymore because he was taken too soon from us with the whole the cough event that happened a couple of years ago. You know, I don't want to say the name, but it's kind of, I guess. But in terms of like a specific mentor, no, I've never had anything like that. I suppose I've always just given over to God in a sense, and I've just tried my best to humbly make the right choice based on numerous influences in my life. And you know, we're a product of nurture as much as nature, I understand. And I said my friends have molded me along the way, made me the thinker I am today, challenged me growing up, you know, and I was blessed to have those friends that do those things. But it's ironic because as I've grown older, one of those people I would consider my best friend, who lived a few doors down from me, who was always there having these conversations, and when I gave myself to Christ, he distanced himself from me. And it came to the point that when I got married and I said, I want you, you know, you're invited, I want to be there, he says, no, I'm okay, I don't want to be there. And it wasn't like he was angry at me, he was indifferent. I wasn't his friend anymore. I wasn't somebody who knew anymore. And it had been a few years since I'd seen him, but I never once stopped to think, you're not my friend anymore. Clearly he didn't. He did see it that way, and I had no idea. But it's kind of, you know, you learn these things. So if you can have... I looked up to him quite a lot, you know. But this is the thing, people will let you down. And these are just lessons you learn. So, again, I suppose... the only person you can trust is Jesus and God at the end of the day. So I guess, I'm not trying to be too terrible. There's some good people out there, but fundamentally, this, I suppose, the lesson we learn while living is never meet your heroes, and people are fallible, and we have to forgive them and understand that that's the nature of sin.
Mm-hmm.
So
I agree. And even if I'm honest and I think about the different mentors and the guides that I've had in my life, they were there for the smallest season when I really needed them, and then they disappear and you never see them again. So it's like all those times, maybe a sermon, maybe a Bible study, and you try and reach out to them and they're just gone at that point. I'm like, oh, well, I appreciate for the time that God gave you to me, and I really appreciate that. I know you kind of touched on a little bit of like what you're doing now. Do you see yourself as a teacher and a guide to anybody who follows you and what you do with your organization?
I mean, in a way, I suppose I am. I don't know what I intended when I started the channel. I've inadvertently fallen ass backwards into this position, and I'm okay with it. I stress to people, I'm not a pastor. I'm not leading a church here. I'm literally just some guy who doesn't know when to shut up. I have a microphone, an internet connection, and a laptop, and I like to talk. Don't read too much into it. Don't think I'm not your leader. I'm not. All I try and do is point people to Christ, and hopefully, I'm trying to set an example. My ethos and my mission statement became, when I was born again, we need to be the example for Christianity that brings more people to it. Because unfortunately, there are a lot of people with the right information, but it might be in the wrong hands, and they're not dealing with it well enough to represent us, and only pushing people further away as a result. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to show that you can be a Christian and still be a normal, personable human being who understands things and isn't lost to some kind of odd, nebulous form of cult-like Christianity where you preach this odd language they can't understand, and get too overzealous to the point where you seem like you're a lunatic. And again, each to their own style. That works for some, doesn't work for others. But I know me, that it didn't work for me at the time, and I needed more personable teachers. So I'm trying to put myself in that position. If I have this platform and I'm trying to get the gospel to people, then I need to be a good ambassador for that truth. And it's not just that the conspiracy stuff as well is kind of what I'm also trying to relay to people, that not all a lot of conspiracy theories come off as jabbering nut jobs. They really do, and they push people away because they're just lost in that fear mentality that and it's just understandable. I empathize with why they're like that. Don't get me wrong, you have good reason to be angry and fearful of the horrible things that are going on in the world and the horrible injustices that we're witnessing. But at the same time, we're talking about people don't buy ideas or the truth just because it's true. People buy things because of the person selling it to them. So you have to tackle the truth. And that truth comes under Christianity for me as well as conspiracy. You have to handle it as though you're kind of a salesman. Unfortunately, I'm not happy about that situation. It's just human nature of how people react to things. And I think our presentation, our demeanour, our attitude has to be good and presentable and understandable and calm and cool and collect and maybe a bit funny with a bit of flair here and there, with a bit of a performance element, because that's what people want. That's what they buy. They're not going to buy the truth just because it's true. Unfortunately, they need to see that. They need to see that. Okay, well, if I'm going to buy into this, if I'm going to believe this truth, and you look like a nut job, I don't end up looking like you. I don't want to become like this crazy tinfoil hat wearing jabbering lunatic here. So I'm not going to listen to what you have to tell me, because I don't want to run the risk of ending up looking like you. That's what people are thinking in their head. So if you can come across as somebody who's still normal and knows these things, then they'll think, well, this guy's got his stuff together and he believes this stuff, so maybe there's something to it. It is sadly the suit phenomenon, where a suit and people will more readily trust you. It is kind of that sort of thing, and I suppose I've been trying to do that on my channel, trying to present the truth in that way, in a more presentable way, in a way they can take the video and show it to their friends and family, knowing it's not going to push them away, hopefully. I'm trying to create evergreen content about truth that you can show to anybody, and with confidence. And I encourage other people to do the same. That's why I'm trying to get other people. And I network with a lot of channel makers. I talk to I get a lot of podcasters on my own podcast, and I let them tell their journey. And we have these truth or therapy sessions where I try and explain the pitfalls of waking up and learning truth. And we kind of have this propensity to want to tell everybody and scream from the rooftops, do you see these things I see? We're all being controlled. There's evil people everywhere, and you're trying to slap people awake, and then the initial reaction is you lose all your friends and family and end up alone. I'm trying to help people avoid those pitfalls and process the truth better. So in a way, yes, I guess I have kind of become a teacher and a leader in that sense, but I don't consider myself I'm not somebody you should be putting on a pedestal necessarily. I don't feel like I'm doing anything other people could do. Everybody can do what I'm doing, and I'm trying to create that kind of community where people can have the confidence to do the same thing. Because you're in the game, it's not easy to build a platform. A lot of it's luck, unfortunately, and I just somehow, through the grace of God and good luck, I now have a platform, and I'm doing the best I can with it, and I'm still learning, and I hope people would apply that grace to me through the process. Some do, some don't, but I'm certainly not something to idolize. That's the worst possible thing to do. I'm a human being who makes mistakes. So yes, I'm a teacher. Didn't mean to be. Somehow I'm trying to do the best I can with that as it is, learning every day. So that's the roundabout answer to what's going on with that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I remember asking that question to another podcast interview, and they were like, I don't feel qualified to be a teacher or a guide or anything like that, so I'm going to have to say no. I was like, well, if you're unqualified, that makes you the best, honestly, because those are the people that Jesus used all throughout Scripture. I mean, look at the 12 disciples. They were 12 losers. They were not the cream of the crop by any means, and so even just thinking about just the different areas of influence and discipleship that I have in my own life. Like, I don't put on my God badge and be like, yeah, look at me. I know what I'm talking about. I might talk like I know what I'm talking about, but in reality, just like you said, like the platform that I've attempted to build for myself, it's nothing in comparison to whatever God wants to do. God could take one podcast episode and blow up everything. He could take one YouTube video and blow it up. Like what you said with the luck. I mean, I don't know what God's relation is to luck, but I know that he allows some things and he doesn't allow other things. And that's between him and the Holy Spirit and Jesus, because it's not in my hands, that's for sure. Because if it was up to me, I'd be a lot more famous than I am right now. But I'm interested. One of my favorite questions to ask is, are you more of a book person or a movie person, if you could only have one for the rest of your life?
I've wrote my own book, so I guess I'm more of a book person.
I was going to ask about that in a second.
No. Yeah, I guess I'm more of a book person these days. I mean, no medium itself is the be-all, end-all of communication of information. So I'm an artist. I use every medium available to me to communicate, whether that's sculpture, painting, drawing, video, photography, or film, or whatever it is. I make my own adverts, for example. So I'm not against, anything in particular. I don't think I could choose one or over the other. I could go without any of them, really, as long as I can still talk. That's all that counts to me. And as I get older, and I'm gaining arthritis in my fingertips lately, my ability to communicate in certain means is being taken away from me slowly, and all I've got is my voice as I get older. So I suppose books. If I had to choose, I would stick with books. But I'm not too picky. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, then, if you were to write a book about your life, what would you want it to be called?
If it was about my life, I wouldn't call it "The Nephilim Look Like Clowns." But if it's what could I possibly say that doesn't sound like an absolute cheesy, nonsensical cliche? I have no idea. There you go. I have no idea. That's what I would call it. I have no idea. And fundamentally, that's what God is always trying to teach you before you're born again, isn't it? So there you go.
I like it. Well, I know that that's not exactly what your book is called, or what the book that you've written is called or what that's about. Do you want to touch on that a little bit? How long have you been working on that project?
Sure, yeah. So the book is just got published 2 months ago. It's called The Nephilim Look Like Clowns. And I know what you're thinking. That's what the hell is that? I have no idea what you're talking about. And that's kind of the point. It's a bit of a hook to get people in to talk about occult symbolism, the history of demons, of the giants, their aesthetics, the way they look, how cultures today still worship them through folk traditions, how they have clown-like aesthetics in the traditions today, and how people who do things like psychedelic drugs see jesters and clowns in the DMT realm. That's a culture I come from, so it's kind of where I'm trying to reach them with the gospel and get them to reinterpret their experiences from a biblical perspective rather than a Jungian perspective, which they seldom go with. So it's kind of a hook, the Nephilim like clowns, to get the gospel to this generation that otherwise needs something like the clown to get them their ears perked up to listen to what I have to say, you know. But there is much validity to what I'm saying as well. Clowns have always been representations of demons, historically speaking. I've got the documents to prove it. The first costume of a clown from the 1800s was modelled after Indian demons called the Rakshasas. And prior to that, Harlequin was modelled after the wild men of Europe, which is the European flavour of the same demon. So it's kind of like a historical analysis of what it is, what a symbol is, what an occult symbol is, and how they're used by secret societies to channel demons, basically. So it's a spiritual warfare book, it's a history book, it's a biblical history book, it's a Christian contrarian history book. It's a love letter to the psychedelic community to get them to know Christ. It's a lot of things, but it's sold 1,600 copies, I think, now.
Oh, praise God.
In 2 months. The reviews are in. It's got 4.9 out of 46 reviews. The response has been amazing, and it's basically an amalgamation of 8 years worth of work. I started the series in 2016 when the idea came to me. And that's a whole other story, a podcast for another time. But I did it for 2 years. I made 17 episodes in 2 years. I had to stop for 5 years. And since then, I've started again 2 years ago, and I'm up to 44 episodes. And it got to the point where it's like, I need to write this book. I need to document all these ideas down. And I put out a GoFundMe to fund it. People pre-ordering the book. The response was overwhelming. I got 88 pre-orders, you know, and it's kind of, wow, like people want this book, you know. And it took a year to write. I learned so much in that process. I've never written a book before. You know, I've written a dissertation for university, so writing wasn't a mystery to me. So it's a heavily referenced biblical work. It's a scholarly work. You can find all the references to it. It's like 360 references to other people's work in there. I've tried to make this as relatable to all audiences as possible, as well as the academic types who need those sources, you know, not just those who want a good story and a good writing style. So I feel like I've managed to do that. And the second book will be hopefully published by the back end of next year to finally finish off the body of work. So that's my book. The Nephilim Look Like Clowns. You can go either watch the videos for free on my channel, or you can support me by buying the book. So there we go.
Fantastic. Yeah, I'll put links in the description on the podcast episode, so people will be able to find those pretty accessibly. That's incredible, man. I'm excited. That's a book that I have a story, a short one after we're done with the recording, to even know why I got introduced to you, because I've got some questions of my own on that. Okay. But wanna kind of wrapping up the questions that I have for the podcast itself is, what would you say to encourage someone or challenge someone who is scared or intimidated in sharing their story?
There isn't anybody in this world that hasn't encountered something spiritual or divine. Whether they talk about it or not, they've all encountered it. If you have the courage to speak up and tell your story, you're setting the right example for more people to open up and share their story of how they have experienced the spiritual and divine in their own life, and it only brings more people to God. So have no fear. No fear.
No, absolutely. And then just the last question I have, is there anything else you sense that God wants you to share on behalf of anybody who'd be listening to this episode?
I've been thinking lately about the 5 times in the Gospels Jesus Christ said the phrase, "Ye of little faith." I think it was 4 times in Matthew and once in Luke. And if you're going to take anything away from those words of Christ, it's not only that obviously you should have faith in Christ when the guy is literally there casting out demons, healing the sick, healing the lepers, making the blind see again, walking on water, yet you still lack the faith to see what's going on in front of you. First of all, have faith is the fundamental message, but I also take it as an example that Jesus is a really relatable guy. And I've been thinking about this passage a lot lately as somebody who's ended up in a teaching position trying to share the gospel. Is when Christ says that phrase, ye of little faith, I imagine him like he's got such exacerbation in his voice. He's like, I'm literally walking on water, and you walked on water a little bit, and you still doubted. And it's like that, what have I got to do to get you to see? It's like even in the face of overwhelming evidence, you're still lacking in this faith department. It's kind of, I feel like that's a very human side of Christ there, which we all feel. The frustration of trying to share the truth with people and ending up hitting that brick wall where it's kind of like, what more do you need? And I'm saying if you are in that place in your life where you're trying to share the truth with people and you keep hitting that, it's like, I don't know how much more evidence I can give you to prove that what I'm trying to tell you is true, but you're still like not believing. It's kind of, Christ went through the same thing. He's been through that exact same emotion. Oh, ye of little faith. I mean, come on. I'd literally just raised the guy from the dead and you still don't believe me. It's kind of like, what more can I? It's kind of like we've all been there. Like, we've all been there. And even the Savior has been there too. So if you want to encourage, God has just put it on my heart to relay that point to people. You can take it as a beautiful story of faith in itself, but also the exacerbation even the Son of God had towards people who should have known better. Like, we all feel that on our journey to try and share the truth. So bear that in mind.
Absolutely, man. That was like the best way you could have ended, and I'm really grateful for your story. Thank you for sharing your story, and I love ending the podcast with a silly joke that me and my friends started at the first episode, and I typically end with a high five with my guest. And I know we're doing this electronically, and so I'm going to ask that you pick a number between 1 and 10 for me.
Out loud?
Yes, please. It's not a magic trick.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. 8.
8. All right. So I'm going to count down from 8, and when we get down to that last number, we are going to high five the camera to make it look like we're high fiving each other. All right.
Okay. Sure.
All right.
Sure.
And then after the high five, then the recording will just be done at that point. So nothing too much to worry about. All right. So 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's Infinite Story. If it resonated with you, send it to someone you think would be blessed by it. If you would like to share your story, please reach out to us at infiniteideas.studio. You never know how far the impact of your story can reach. Take care now.